Welcome to the first open workshop that I titled Human Renaissance Consulting Protocol for Recovering from Ex-Vegan Guilt and Shame. Today we're going to look into a specific story and we're going to build the action plan for how to deal with this feeling. Because the person that emailed me, they're actually in therapy, but their psychotherapist struggles to solve this problem. And in fact avoids it. And it will be very clear, it will be quite striking from the email. So I decided to employ my consulting method to show you how this problem could be tackled. And of course, I will make this disclaimer now that every hypothesis in this video would be discussed and tested with a client. I think it's an apparent thing, but I just wanted it to be clear that of course, whenever I talk about some hypothesis, when I have a client in the same room or in the same online space, I would be able to test the hypothesis. I would be able to test my proposals. I would be able to ask questions about whether certain things apply to the client or not. In this case, I will be just throwing those hypotheses as some food for thought for everyone who is watching, but those would be my natural ideas, natural concepts that I derived by just studying whatever the subscriber sent to me, based on that, only that in piece of interaction that we had. I'm illustrating the initial steps of work that would be further followed by the steps based on the client's feedback, and that unfortunately cannot be predicted with certainty. I want to read you the story that I received. I've watched several of your YouTube videos and I have seen your post on ex-vegan subreddit. I'm an ethical vegan, or was, of about 7 years. I have recently been trying to quit, or I guess technically I have, and have been eating some eggs and cheese occasionally. I am convinced of the health arguments against veganism, but still, I feel immense guilt day after day about what my brain perceives to be abandoning the animals. I know it's illogical, and I am an animal too, but I don't know how to get past this. I wonder if you would consider doing a video talking about guilt and shame. I have gathered from your videos that you are not an ethical vegan, so maybe you don't have personal advice, but I wonder if the many ex-vegans you have talked to gave any advice. I've listened to a few interviews but haven't really come across this. It sucks because I have diagnosed OCD, so my brain replays videos I've seen on animals like, for example, male chicks being macerated in the egg industry. I'm in therapy, but my therapist doesn't really get it. She just suggests I go back to veganism if I keep having these images, which is frustrating. I didn't suffer any noticeable health problems being vegan. The main reasons I wanted to quit or change are to experience life more fully, especially while traveling, and I worry about potential future deficiencies. I do suffer from depression and anxiety, and I wonder if veganism has fueled those conditions, though there is nothing obvious in my blood work to suggest that. Here, a quick note, I don't know if you've seen this video, but I have a video on some non-apparent blood work that is essential for vegans. Unfortunately, doctors don't prescribe that, doctors don't know about that. Some general doctors, it's not a part of standard vegan protocol, and it's a huge mistake of medical field right now. I would really, if I had some knob to turn there, if I had some influence on this area of medicine, I would surely pitch this to every doctor out there that if you see vegan, prescribe those tests. Absolutely prescribe those tests, because without them, your blood work can be affected, can be greatly influenced by, some multivitamin, but it will not be representative of what's happening on the back end of your body, where all of that stuff is supposed to be metabolized and used for vital functions. So this is some side note. Please watch the video on blood work. And here another note that I have is for therapy. I was kind of surprised to read that the therapist tells person, first of all, crosses ethical boundary to prescribe the person to go on malnourishing lifestyle. That's one red flag. And then another thing that surprised me, I don't know if it's normal or not. All therapists that I've dealt with, encountered in my life, they would probably approach the situation differently. Plus, I myself also having multi-year experience working in consulting, in research consulting, I'm also kind of perplexed with this approach. That a person comes to you with a problem that sits on the way of some natural desire of that person, and you just tell the person to dismiss the problem and go back to where you started. Basically, don't approach what you want. To me, the sentiment that if you have obsessive thoughts on the way of you eating the way you want and experiencing life the way you want. You should just not eat the way you want because of those obsessive thoughts. This is as if a smoker came to the therapist and told that I want to quit smoking, but the moment I quit smoking, I start having obsessive thoughts about cigarettes. Please help. I cannot resolve it on my own. And therapist would be like, no, if thoughts are too bad, then too bad, go back to smoking. Or another example that comes to my mind. If a woman, for example, really wants to have a child, but she comes to therapist with the request that I really want to have a child. This is the right moment in my life to have a child. I have all conditions. I am fully mature for that, but I'm terribly scared of pregnancy and labor. And that prevents me from pursuing pregnancy. Please help. And therapist would be like, well, too bad. Just don't have children then. So this is that attitude. A very, very surprising story. But I have tried to gather information from this email and actually create some analytics and step-by-step approach to actually tackling this situation. So in synopsis, I wrote down two opposing states, two opposing conditions. Something that the client is unhappy with, something that is abnormal, something that is unsatisfactory. In the left column, we have immense guilt, we have shame, we have OCD, replace scenes of animal killing and abuse, depression, and anxiety. And then in the right column, I wrote down that the client knows that quitting veganism would be good for their health. They want to quit to be able to experience life more fully, especially while traveling. And the person is also worried about the potential deficiencies. So these are the two opposing things that we get to work with. And the hardest emotion here is guilt. We see that it's worded as immense guilt. That is coupled with also obsessive thoughts, with reiterating the source of that guilt. So there is a vicious cycle of guilt, then thoughts, then guilt, and thoughts. So this became my first target. This became something that grabbed my attention, and this is where I started unfolding this client's case. So let's look at it. Let's formulate guilt as my good part, like I have good part and I have bad part, and my good part judges my bad part. And the stronger the split between the so-called good part and the bad part is, the stronger will be the challenge that the psyche will have to endure, because effectively every part of personality is there for something. Every part of personality addresses certain need, addresses certain demand. It addresses certain adaptation. So suppressing them may become incredibly taxing, incredibly energy demanding, actual physical energy demanding to cope with, because there's this background frustration that I am, for example, trying to solve life problems with very limited toolbox, because I think that some tools that I have in my toolbox are bad. This is frustration and self-repression that live on the background. And yes, as I said, it also causes us to use misfit, not optimal tools for solving the problems in life, for achieving goals, for enjoying certain processes, and so on. So there are a lot of things that are hindered by that. And the first direction of work, in my opinion, should be to meet the good part and the bad part, and then also find their functions. It can be not just a part, it could be parts. We can divide them, we can compartmentalize them further. But in general, it would be something that we consider to be good and something that we consider to be bad. And then we need to become aware of the functions that they play. Why do they exist in us? So my initial hypothesis about this case, given the symptoms that may indicate autoaggression resulting in anxiety, depression, and OCD, is that there might be an adaptation that took place sometime in the past that perhaps gave the client a feeling that it is safer to be a convenient person than to protect their boundaries and pursue their interests directly. For example, there could be a circumstance in which a child, for example, was shamed for their authenticity, for doing certain things, for exercising their natural rights, for speaking up about their desires, or they were blamed for some adult problems. For example, because of you, I could not do this and this, so better be convenient because you're guilty in the experiences that I never had or bad experiences that I did have. There could be numerous scenarios in that. And we can spend eternity trying to figure it out, trying to grieve that, and it's actually an important therapeutic step as well. But going in depth on those things may not be the exact target of our work today. How it works in the case, for example, when imagine the child, for example, tried to do something, tried certain new behaviors. And the formula that we can draw here is that I declare my rights, my wants, my existence, which means I become inconvenient. I start infringing on someone else's boundaries. I start exercising, expanding my influence. I start expanding my effect on the environment. Then, the next thing that happens, I'm being punished for that, and I develop shame and guilt. Which means that when I feel shame and guilt, these are very unpleasant feelings, I start suppressing my rights, wants, my authenticity, my existence, and all of these, they become that bad side of me. So my wants, my interests, my rights, my existence, they all become something very inferior. They all become something that is unsafe to exercise. They are bad. And when I suppress them, I am safe and wanted. This is how this guilt, this pathological guilt and shame, in general, at the core of personality, can shape in repeated scenarios in childhood. Whatever we exercise for a long period of time flourishes. If it is safer to repress yourself, you're going to be repressing yourself until, again, you realize sometime in your adulthood, until you realize that you're not moving in life anymore. The function that you developed to adapt, for example, to coexist with abusive parents, it no longer serves you. You cannot just keep living this way in the adult world because you start being awake to certain desires that you would want in life. You want to pursue certain goals. You would want to live differently. You would want to move to a certain place. Anything. It can be anything. It could be something small. It could be something grandiose. But you have this adaptation. You didn't when you're exercising something pathological, you're simultaneously not exercising something good and useful. So this is where we see the dysfunction later in life, how it manifests. It saved the child from punishment, from pain in the past. It doesn't work in the adulthood. There's no figure around the person unless, again, they enter some abusive relationships or whatnot. There's no figure that would be punishing them. But their behavioral models are already built and are very rigid. And what we see here is that shame, guilt, self-repression, being convenient equates to safety. And authenticity equates to conflicts, pain, and danger. This is the proposed nature of why we have this baseline guilt. And now if we analyze what's inside of this bad side, what is that bad side in general? Why did it try to evolve in us when we were little? Why did we want to exercise our freedoms when at certain developmental phase? Our bad side, this inconvenient side, right, normally exists for protecting our survival, to fight for our interests, for acquisition of resources, for our safety, for recognizing and achieving our goals, for protecting and developing our habitat, for then later it translates to us being able to defend our children, to, again, acquire more and more resources we expand in life. and as we expand in life, and as we pursue more like beyond survival goals, let's say. But when a person exercises the opposite enough times, when they prohibited the development of this bad side and maturation of that bad side, it turns into this dead, unwanted weight on the shoulders. While the good side, this accepted side, whatever traits the person developed that were favored by, let's say, their parents or whoever it was who was teaching them to behave a certain way, that good side is supposed to fulfill the needs to get all of those things covered. So the good side, without having the tools to achieve any of the above examples of where the bad side could work, makes your life quite inefficient because that's the only tool you can freely use. What, let's say, mom allowed you, what mom encouraged you to use. It may fail to work as you grow further, grow beyond your basic childhood survival. So in the case of the client, we observe that the client squeezes their boundaries to not allow themselves to eat the foods they want and need. But it would be a safe assumption that it might be a behavioral pattern in other areas of life as well. So here I have two thoughts that arise in this context. First, in the case of veganism, the desire to express that suppressed bad part may be realized through activism, where camaraderie helps to ensure safety and also gives the sense of safety. I'm not fighting for myself, which is bad. I am fighting for the innocent. I am fighting for those who cannot stick up for themselves, which is good. So you exercise that need of that bad side of person, but you just redirect it, which proves that this need exists, that this feature, this trait exists in your psyche. It just tries to exercise itself in some other field. And then another thought that I had here is that good part can be largely morphed with some significant figure that shaped the superego, the controlling self, the controlling part of our mind, and thus being a foreign and dominant voice in the head that belongs to someone else. So this dichotomy between good and bad, with existing residual influence of some significant figure that shaped this split between good and bad, that figure may be the one that actually you look at, with whose eyes you're looking at the world, with whose eyes you are analyzing yourself, with whose eyes you evaluate your life and your decisions. This is also something that can be a therapeutic target that we might work on, and that we can work on to eradicate those voices in the head, to reclaim the ownership over your own mind. Because where there's unity, there is also ownership, full ownership. And I want you to feel that you can imagine yourself in some capacity. It can be a combination. Don't focus on physical or mental. Just imagine a vessel. And imagine that there is a part where you sit in that vessel, you as yourself. And then there are certain features that were artificially brought there. And the more oppressive things there are in that vessel, the less there is space for you yourself. And the goal is to fill that vessel with yourself, with everything that makes you up. Remove all the junk, remove everything that doesn't belong there, and find that unity. We are now going to proceed with action 1. Given what we just discussed, that there is a bad persona and good persona, or bad side, bad part and good part, and that good part judges the bad part for something, and that is where our guilt stems from, we need to first do this analytical work. Approach it through logic. Approach it through just some life observations and thinking. There will be nothing metaphysical, nothing crazy, nothing ritualistic. We need to write down, my good and bad parts, what are their functions? We'll need to write down every function that your bad part or parts perform. Where in your life do you choose to be good and experience frustration as a result? So you need to find examples from your life where you stepped on your throat and then you regretted that. Then in the aftermath, you thought, I should have done that. I should have been more assertive. I should have been more firm in sticking for my own self, for my own interests. Why didn't I do that? So think about those situations where you should have exercised your bad side, but you decided to be good, and you endured some discomfort, regret about it. You lost something through that. So this is another part of this exercise. Then you need to think, in general, where in life do you want to stick up for yourself more? Some real life examples. You can think about self-realization and career, personal and sexual life, your friendships, relationships with parents. It can be even your image, how you look, how you present yourself in the world. All of these things can indicate to you, you can find where are you suppressing yourself? Where would you want to express yourself better? And what consequences, what functions would it have? So this is the first part of the exercise. You will need to write down as many examples as possible where the good part fails to give you satisfaction, and how the bad part, and then therapeutic action number 2 that I would perform with this client. We did this rational exercise. We identified where it could be useful really useful to actually embrace that bad side, this inconvenient side. But the second way of working is, of course, to go into the body. Body is honest. Body is pure. Body always wants to survive, and body always acts in our best interest. So we can always go back to our body for answers, for connection, for reconnection with our intuition, for a connection with ourselves, for grounding ourselves. And so in this therapeutic action number 2, the first exercise, the first diagnostic action that I would suggest would be to diagnose how shame and guilt make your body feel. Where are those sensations in your body? How does your perception of your body change when you drown in guilt? Describe it, feel it. Where is it? Identify it, locate it. Close your eyes and scan your entire body when you feel that. What happens to you? Do you maybe shrink, tense up, have spasms? Then another important thing here is, how do you breathe when you feel those feelings? Can you breathe all the way from your nose down to your pelvic floor? Check that. How deeply does the breath go? Then how do you see your life, world around you when it happens? Can you see, before this guilt and shame attack happened? How did your world look like? Now, when it happened, what happened to the world around you? How does your life feel now? Another thing that you can visualize, it's actually, if you try to do it, you will understand how it feels. But in those emotions, when you're experiencing these emotions acutely, do you become smaller or bigger in your perception? How does your perceived, maybe metaphoric, maybe some metaphysical size change? How does it change? Also, what happens to your sense of strength? Analyze these things. Live in this guilt, and in actual consultation, it can be performed under guidance when you immerse in those feelings, and you do this with full focus with the guide when you scan your body parts, when you scan your breathing patterns, when you do it in a controllable fashion. You can also do it on your own. Just put a piece of paper or a laptop with some text editor in front of you, go into the small meditation, induce that guilt, and observe the changes in your body. Important though, if you're going to do this on your own, you need to enter the meditation through the relaxation first. You need to do some practice, whatever works with you, to achieve the baseline state against which you will be comparing your state in the sense of guilt and shame. There are some nuances to this practice that you might want to take into account, but if you can catch yourself experiencing those feelings and just document everything that you're feeling, fully describe your body, fully scan your body using those questions, you might be all set. You might observe a lot of interesting things. The next therapeutic step that I would employ within this part of work is, whose eyes does the good part wear? Who is entitled to be the judge in your life? If you remove that filter, how would you see your bad side with your own eyes from within your body? Because again, the body, when it's relaxed, when it's happy, it sees the world the way it is. It sees the world with either neutrality or joy, for the most part, unless again there is the rare circumstance of acute danger. Those voices in the head, those filters, they create trauma, to some trauma that sunk in and integrated and part of personality. It can taint your perception of the entire world, of yourself. So this is very important to also go in some state of meditation and find in that vessel, if you imagine yourself as that vessel, who also sits in it alongside with you, who is there. And in general, whatever practices we're going to discuss today, their goal is to not practice for the sake of practice. Like, some people, they go to the gym just to keep going to the gym and do larger weights. No. The practices that we're discussing today, they are important because since they activate many senses, since they produce very, on the one hand, organic imagery, but on the other hand, it's very impressive imagery because we devote time to actually walk through this imagery. Organic imagery because you can only induce the thoughts that already exist in your head from the catalog of impressions that you've had in your head. That's why those things are very well familiar to you. You're not going to imagine something that you've never seen before. You're generating organic, easy to digest imagery, situations, feelings in your head that at the same time you devote your time to. You do some exploratory work on them. Unlike when you just, for example, think some thought randomly in the middle of the day, you let it affect your mood and you move on. There's no accomplishment in that. When we do it in a dedicated practice, when we do it with full focus, we're capable of generating, identifying the states, the imagery associated with the states, and then we can find antidotes to them. And those antidotes also now have the imagery. So if before you found the antidote, you only had the imagery of some unfavorable scenario, unfavorable state of mind, now, when you found an antidote, you are capable of grabbing the imagery of that antidote and cause it whenever some spontaneous thoughts arise. This is how the practices work. You just introduce yourself to certain things that already exist in your psyche. You were never aware of them existing. So this is how those practices work. You teach your brain to transmit basically some passive thing into your active catalog of tools that you can then use on a daily basis. Because again, those impressions are very easily digestible. You won't need to force yourself to induce this imagery. It will be very native to you. And you will be surprised with how good it works. In the therapeutic action number 2, when we start connecting with our body, when we start connecting with our authenticity, we need to introduce a couple of practices here. So the client suffers from anxiety, and that can be due to numerous factors, including the underlying problems, maybe some biochemical problems due to the malnutrition, diet. If we assume that there was some malnutrition happening, the problem that the client brought also in itself can cause anxiety, right? Coping with some frustration. But also the client can be overstimulated, regardless of which. Anxiety, especially chronic stress, chronic anxiety, all of this emotional intensity over and over and over, it creates physical, somatic response in the body. Our organs, they all respond to stress. When the organs respond to stress and they remain in that state, they send the signal back to the brain that there is stress. So we enter this vicious cycle. We enter the loop of stress. The practices that target relaxation, practices that target release of anxiety, all of those things, they can help us to break this vicious cycle of stress, bring us clarity such that we can own the stress type of thing, such that we don't have stress induced from within, perpetuating it. You know how, for example, if you have some muscle tension, you try to sleep, you try to relax. To release muscle tension, you need to fall asleep. But the moment you start falling asleep, this muscle tension wakes you up, so you cannot sleep. You cannot sleep. The next day you wake up tired. You have muscle tension that did not recover because you didn't get a good sleep. And now you are very tired and your muscles prevent you from falling asleep. This is the similar situation when you are dealing with chronic stress that already induced effects in your organs. Because stress means that there is some life-threatening situation that we need to resolve, that we need to escape. So there is, at the bare minimum, there is a response that there's blood supply to different organs. It becomes different. Different hormones starts getting synthesized. Living in this perpetual state is very dangerous. It's very harmful. It's physically harmful. This is why at this step of consultation work, we would introduce an array of relaxation techniques and breathing exercises for quick management of stress response. And the cherry on the pie here would be that addresses somebody else's eyes, that can help you cleanse your, again, this it's a weird concept, the perceived body of yours, of guilt and shame, for example, of any oppressive emotion. Again, it could be after you communicated with a narcissist. You can feel similar feelings that you shrink inside of your body. And this, for example, narcissistic figure occupies you and now demolishes your entire life. You look at your life as some pile of garbage almost after talking to a narcissist. This practice is called Giant. I designed it for myself, deduced it through logic when I observed those feelings. I have a narcissist that I communicate with on some semi-regular basis in my life. And after the communication with that person, I always find myself absolutely destroyed for 2 days. Mentally destroyed. My entire mind, all my thoughts are occupied with analysis of how we communicated. What happened during that communication? I analyze every glance, I analyze every word, because it feels like I look at my life with it's terrible. It's not worthy. I should be doing so much more. I should be a different person. I should be doing this and this. And I realized that for 2 days, this person literally for no reason steals 2 days of quality of my life. 2 days worth of quality of my life and actually rational thinking. It was very, very harmful. It was very, very dysfunctional. And when I analyzed what happens in my body in response to that, in my combined body and mind, I cannot separate the two. It's not just flexing muscles and having some mental effect. No, it's combined body and mind, this vessel. I was able to develop an antidote for that. Fantastic, simple practice, 8 minutes long, called Giant, and it is for quickly returning to the normal self-perception and wholeness. It's an antidote practice that is super, super easy to memorize how it feels, and you can just induce the sensations that you got in that practice in any life situation without committing to performing the practice. Now we're moving on to the second part of analysis. We discussed so far, in general terms, we discussed guilt and shame, their nature, and some preparational steps in our work, such that our client can go home and already start practicing something and start analyzing, start thinking about their situation from new angles. Next part of our consulting work would be our recovery work, would be to work with the most important thing here, I think, the brightest thing in this situation, that unfortunately the therapist dismissed and decided just remove from the picture, is those flashbacks, is those obsessive thoughts. The client gets flashbacks of essentially very sadistic, emotionally charged scenes of baby animals being cruelly destroyed by a metal grinder. These are quite traumatic and maybe quite shocking, making a strong impression on a person. However, an important note here is that not everybody will let those impressions sink in their mind and become something fundamental in their mind. It won't become a core visual for someone. So some people will see that, they will acknowledge that, yes, this happens. This is the cost of my food. Some, like, I guess, in the natural cycle, this is the cost of my food. For some person, it will become a tragedy. It will become something that deeply sinks in their mind. We can say that it's an attachment to those images. So this person will keep reiterating them in their imagination over and over and over and over. And it requires a certain quality. There's something behind it that makes those scenes really stick and dominate. They don't just stick and remain in the mind. They dominate. They are the priority thoughts and ideas and visuals in the head of the person. And when that happens, it might be important to find the role of that regurgitation in one's specific psyche. We are not forcing these thoughts out. We are not, because they play the role. We are going to find out what they're for. What are those thoughts communicating us? What is unfinished about this? What exists that those thoughts kind of cannot satisfy? Imagine this feeling that it is like an attempt. Yes, let's do it. And then, boom, something is not brought to completion. That's why those thoughts, they come over and over and over and over. So we're going to embrace them. We're going to study them at this stage. And we're going to try to understand what they are really about. It is something very deep about the personality, about the psyche of the given person, that those thoughts, those obsessive thoughts and scenes are trying to deliver. Something that if left unfinished, will keep haunting the person forever, be them vegan or not. They can as well learn that agriculture causes millions of deaths and can focus on that and eat even other foods with that feeling as well. The question that we state here is, what is the message that psyche is trying to deliver by repeatedly inducing those scenes where little, listen to this closely, like immerse in this, where little, innocent, very cute, yellow and fluffy, so precious, so fragile, little male chicks, the pure energy of new life, untainted, naive, seeking protection and love and joy. They are being separated from their mother, from their comfort and safety, and then thrown in this cold and noisy metal facility where, in terror, they glide down the track to violent death, not having even lived their life. So what is this story about? And we can think about different aspects about control, controlling some part of life, but they will be actually those things, like probably with control, for example, vegan part of it is possessing control over your life. These things will surface through the practice that I suggest next. Because we're going to dig into where this pain sits, and we're going to try finding the antidote for that. Because this story, if it touches the core of the person, is not just. So, therapeutic action number 3 is quite interesting. And again, you can try to follow along and design the practice for yourself, or you can seek guidance, and we can do this together. I'm actually a big fan of immersive feedback guided meditations, imaginative guided meditations with feedback, again, when two people go into the meditation and they walk through it together. It's a super powerful, super fascinating tool that I absolutely love. And I'm going to walk you through how it works. The step 1 is immerse the client in a guided feedback meditation, where we first relax, imagine a peaceful, pleasant environment, observe relaxation, which will be our baseline state, and then we will find the facility in that landscape. We will go into that facility, and we will fully follow the process of this repeated scene, because the scenes, they abrupt at something. They're never brought to certain completion that our psyche wants to achieve. We need to study it in detail. We need to give those thoughts full focus now. And we need to play it in certain ways that we'll discuss a little bit later. The guide explains to the client that any metamorphosis is possible there. It is a world where every scenario, even non-physical, can unfold. Physical objects can change beyond their realistic features. So when we walk through this landscape of events, we need to be relaxed, and we just need to follow our impulses and instincts and what do we want, what unfolds in front of us. It happens on its own almost. So we're navigating this world where our psyche throws us imagery that it possesses, that exist. So the second step is that the client starts narrating what is happening in that scene. The guide is taking notes on what words that the client uses and what character they associate with the most in that scene. Where's the focus? What's the focal point of that scene? Asking the client how feelings in their body change as the stages of the scene progress. First, we were in that field, our baseline, then we found the facility, then we entered the facility, then we saw the conveyor belt, and then the scene started unfolding. So how do the feelings change? What are the most emotionally charged moments in the scene? We need to track that. And then another question here is, where does the mind prefer to stick and where it wants to stay in the longest? So what are not only like focal points spatially, but what are the focal points in the story situationally? Where do we want to sit and observe or be in that situation? Then the third step here is the guide asks the client to narrate the story or experience the process from the perspective of each character. So we immerse the client into the bodies of different participants of the scene. And we ask them to describe what they feel, what they experience. In this scenario, we will likely have Mother Chicken, the operator of the facility who runs the machines and who performs that on the chicks, who separates them based on their sex and then disposes the ones that are unwanted. And finally, the male chicks, the main target in the scene. So the question here is, who is the most relatable character? And also why? When you immerse yourself in their image, when you embody them. Monitor how the feelings in the body and breathing change when the client immerses in each character. How perception of self, how perception of the body change. So we need to ask those diagnostic questions on the way and see how they narrate those stories, what they make accents on. So this is what the guide's job is, to watch what are basically the priorities, what are the accents in the psyche that it pursues there. Then the next step, what would the client want to do if they were in the position of the most relatable character? How would they make their situation better? And we play this situation such that it favors the character the client associates with the most. How can that character find the way out of this situation? Will this character want to even punish anyone, perhaps? Maybe there will be some motive of revenge. Where will this character end up after it escapes? How will it morph? What features will it acquire? What would this character need to evolve into to solve this problem? All of these are interesting tasks. So what will it do after it escapes? It's free again. So basically, the depth of this question is, what does this character do when they know that they can control situation? What is their plan of action? What would they want to do? When life no longer happens to them, but they live life. Appreciate the difference between the two. Life happens to someone versus living one's life. So we need to find those two facets and possibly find the way out of life happening to them and find the life that we can live. Find the strength and points of control. And then lastly, after we arrive at this satisfying and relaxed point in this wandering, in this meditation, let's say, we exit it. when we achieve this relaxation, when everything settled down, when we achieved some satisfying result. So we exited. And the next step is we discuss and analyze the observations with the client. How can observations from this practice be used in daily life as well? Perhaps this question would be for later, because usually those meditations, they turn the world of people. Because when you actually face something that your psyche tries to bang at you every single day, when you finally let it be, instead of resisting it, instead of trying to fight it, you arrive to the answers, because everything in this realm exists in your head. Hence, the answers are in your head. The answers are not elsewhere. They all exist here. And you just need to devote time to dealing with them, deeply analyze them in fullness, in completion of this picture, and find the antidote for what it is that is behind those stories, that hurts in those stories, in those thoughts. And then we can grab and further, after you've experienced all of those impressions, after you've lived in all of those images, in all of those qualities, you can think, okay, I'm now familiar, deeply familiar. You will be deeply familiar after this practice, very vividly familiar with every facet of the story. So you will actually extract from within your psyche, you will extract a new mode of operation. And you can see, okay, this situation, I usually act like this, but I resemble this character that I played. What if I act now in the way that this character did after they recovered from the situation that they didn't want? What if I try that? And you put on this, it can be at first, can feel like a costume, but since again, it's not a costume, it's something that comes from within you. So it's pretty authentic thing. It's not a mask, it doesn't feel like a mask. It's not you put something on, you just enter a state that existed in you, and you tackle certain new situation or old situation, some repeated situation in your life, through the perspective of that state. And now, after this step, we cannot say what will happen. So the next steps of work will depend on the client's feedback. Of course, their discoveries, what they have to say, and the overall process that we've just encountered. So one of the other milestones, however, that will arise alongside this work when we deal with something that persists, something that where guilt and shame is, something where those obsessive thoughts are, besides tackling that, we need to also simultaneously work with what it is we want. Because, as I mentioned, there is a dominant thought. There is a dominant paradigm in the head. There's a dominant scope of repeated scenarios, 3-4 things that just circulate in the head. But we need to find what we desire a lot and start building them as a competing dominance, such that we have alternative. We have bigger library of things to choose from when we want some mental chewing gum, when we want to exercise our creativity in life. We need to identify the lack. We need to strive to find our desires. Development of strong want. We need to hear our desires, to meet our desires, to understand them, to embrace them, and to get fueled up by them. So this will help to revive the suppressed parts of the personality and will guide the consulting work to accessing the deepest facets. And in this example, the client wrote that they want to enjoy life fully. They want to travel, to enjoy traveling, moreover, and to be healthy. And we need to distill those concepts. We need to work on those concepts to drive them into what is really behind them with some strong intensity. Because I want to travel. Some people, when they hear travel, they think, I will be packing my suitcase. I will be going to the airport. I need to find where to park my car for this time being. I need to find all the logistics, commutes. I need to rent a car at the destination. I need to rent a place at the destination. It's a nightmare. For some people, travels will be associated with, I want to try this food, and they'll be super excited to have that sensory impression. Some people will be, I want to go to this gallery. I terribly want to spend the day in front of this painting of this artist that I super love, and I'm going to have such a blast. It will charge me up so much. It's like literally it becomes the local meaning of life at that point. This is what's behind traveling. So we need to find something so exciting, so profound behind the concept of traveling, and start arriving to that point. Make it our fundamental desire. Then being healthy is also quite abstract thing. And this quite abstract thing does not tell anything to anyone. For some people, again, being healthy equates to munching on a carrot and celery sticks. But people want to be healthy. What for? What is behind? What goals are going to be accomplished as a result of them being healthy? What does it enable? What's on the menu there? So these things must be distilled into the precise desires. Through all of these, we will be designing custom practices targeting these desired states to fortify them and to turn them into habitual exercised ones. Other bullet points that I wrote were progress in developing a habit for relaxation and self-regulation. This is contingent upon performance of homework, diligent performance of homework, and performance of the exercises. Then development of the observer state, partial focus practices, then incorporating the behavioral and state elements of the suppressed facets of personality into the daily life. We're going to gradually take our insights from the practices and start looking at how they actually integrate in our daily life, how they work. And then we need to also focus on diversifying the application of control in life, from food, veganism, from animals, for example, to other things. We need to design this broad, soft, functional control as opposed to deficient control. Because when you are suppressed, when you grew up suppressed, you strive to control at least something that's super easily achieved, because you don't feel the power to control anything else. So you have this hyper focus on something that you can control. We need to diversify it and find the points of application of control to multiple areas of life, such that they become very functional, very comfortable, and very reasonable. So we don't want to become, some cultist who starts trying to influence weather, for example, through some rituals obsessively, right? So this is something else that also would be targeted through this work. But again, contingent upon the feedback from the client. And here we're going to wrap up, because this is pretty much the extent that I can share without the feedback from the actual client. And this was the outline of the early stages of the Human Renaissance Consulting Protocol. Specifically for the request, how to get rid of guilt and shame for eating animal products after being vegan for many years. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was helpful for you, because I gave you pretty good toolbox to even perform self-diagnosis, to perform certain, self-help actions as well. I gave you pretty good toolbox. So you can do it on your own. You can start employing certain tricks in your daily life right now, because perhaps you did not recognize the existence of certain problem associated with something that bothers you. So maybe even using the logic that I employed for solving this specific problem, you can find the solution for the problem that's completely unrelated to the questions of veganism. So I hope, you will find good use for these materials. And if you want to work with me in solving some life problem that bothers you, of course it can be psychological recovery after veganism. This is something we can surely do. If you struggle with the same problem as the author of this case, the author of the email, then of course, come to work with me. You can book your first session on my website. The link will be in the description. And also there is a discount code for the first session, such that you get the taste for what it is to work in this genre, to work in this method. So please find all necessary information in the description box below. Thank you for watching, and subscribe to my channel. Suggest new topics, ask questions below. I will be very happy to read your comments. Thank you and bye.